Hello, beautiful people. Long time no see. For those of you who might be new to my channel, or for those of you for whom it's been too long and you've already forgotten who I am, hello, my name is Vendi, and today I will be bringing you the page to screen tag. I was tagged to do this about a year ago now by my dear friend Noria from the channel Chronicles of Noria, whose video I'll have linked in the description box below, along with the creator of the tag. There are several versions of a page to screen-esque tag going around on YouTube, but the one I will be using in particular is from Nia from Brown Girl Reading. There are so many excuses I could give you guys to explain where I've been for the past like 6 weeks, I think, but ultimately they don't really matter too much because you're not here for them. You're here for the bookish content and I'm here to deliver. Let's get started. Question number 1 is, what page to screen adaptation made you cry in both formats, so both on page and on screen? While there are no water signs in my birth chart, I feel like I'm like a hidden secret Cancer at heart, or like maybe a Pisces, because I truly cry at everything. Give me an option to feel something tremendously deeply and to emote, and I'm gonna take it. And all of those emotions are hardwired to my tear ducts. And because I couldn't choose to answer it, I have picked 2 books. The first being The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. It follows a teenage girl called Star Carter who witnesses a police officer shooting one of her childhood friends during a traffic stop, and the huge emotional toll that this takes on Star and the Black community at large in Garden Heights, which is where she lives. From Khalil's death to the microaggressions that Star faces at her primarily white private school, to the extremely touching familial moments that occur throughout this novel, there are so many places that just tugged at my heartstrings the entire time I was reading it, and the adaptation was no exception. It was beautifully acted, it was very true to the heart of the story, and while the book has a special place in my heart, both versions definitely made me explode in tears. And on a far less like obviously emotive but a deeply touching to me note, I also have to say Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This is my favorite book of all time. I don't know that I will ever not be emotional when I get to the end of it. There's so many beautiful and, to me personally, touching scenes that I've just ascribed so much meaning toward. And specifically, the live action 2003 movie is like imprinted on my psyche, and I never don't cry when I watch that. Mostly at the end because I don't want the story to be over. Question number 2 is, what page to screen adaptation are you looking forward to watching this year? This question and the answer to it are actually what inspired me to finally pick up this tag and answer it, and that is Shadow and Bone. So Leigh Bardugo's young adult masterpiece, Shadow and Bone / the Grishaverse, is being adapted, or has been adapted, to Netflix, and it's, according to just about everyone, pretty amazing. And I keep caging with like according to everyone and from what I've seen like in stills on Twitter and stuff, because I haven't seen it yet. I am saving it for until I am finished with this semester of my master's program, and I will neither confirm nor deny whether I'm using making this video to procrastinate finishing my final paper for that. And from what I've heard, Shadow and Bone is a relatively honest adaptation of book 1 of the Grisha trilogy, also named Shadow and Bone, following Alina Starkov, an orphan from the nation of Ravka, which is at war, who finds out through truly some ridiculous shenanigans that rather than being a powerless person, she is actually a magic wielder, a Grisha with a super rare ability. And because of her newfound ability, she is conscripted into this great war. I've truly heard nothing but good things about the show. I am very excited to see what the screen adaptation of all of these folks is going to look like and how the showrunners are going to weave these 2 stories together, because they are interconnected, but not as directly as I think they're going to be in the show. So I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with it. Third question is a little bit salty. What page to screen adaptation are you happy to have seen discontinued? And I feel a little bit bad for saying it because I am, as you know, trash for the series in book form, but I am so glad that they only made one City of Bones movie. The acting was truly something else, and I don't mean that in the best way. And it was melodramatic in a way that didn't really like click with the feel of the books, at least in my opinion. And then, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm trying to manifest it, I really hope the kissing booth dies a long and painful death. That one I'm particularly salty about because 1, I am amazed that a story like that managed to get published, and for 2, I have a younger sister who's sort of the target demographic for those movies, and the idea of a story that's targeting her and her demographic that's so chock full of toxic masculinity and really abusive relationship dynamics, and having that touted as the romantic ideal, sickens me, actually. I've only ever seen the first. I wish I could wipe it from my brain and like get those hours of my life back. But I know that there's a second, and I know that the book keeps going, like the series keeps going, so I hope they don't make another. because Jesus Christ, I'm manifesting. No more kissing booth. No more. We don't need it. We as a society have moved past the need for that sort of thing. Pivoting all the way in another direction, prompt number 4 is what series would you like to see adapted? And this one was super easy for me. I immediately have to say the Nightmareverse series by Elle McKinney, starting with A Blade So Black, continuing with A Dream So Dark, and I believe the third book is called A Crown So Cursed. This is a reimagining of the Alice in Wonderland mythos with a Black Alice and through the lens of like what feels to me a little bit like a CW show. And I mean that in the best way possible, because shows like The 100 or like Teen Wolf are the vibe I really kind of want to see this adapted into, but for the audience that it's made for. So like, I don't know, like 13 through 17-ish year olds. It's a really whimsical urban fantasy that I feel like could make its way to screen in such an easy way. I feel like the material is ridiculously accessible. Just about everyone is familiar with the story of Alice in Wonderland and Buffy, which are the 2 comp titles for this. Not to mention it's action-packed and there's so much going on that I feel like it would be really easy to serialize. Overall, I think the series not only deserves an adaptation, but it would be super easy to adapt. Prompt number 5 is what page-to-screen adaptation is in production that you're excited about? And for that, obvious answer, the Witchland series by Susan Dennard. You guys already know that this is basically my favorite series of all time. It has truly everything I love in a story: political intrigue, an interesting magic system, girl friendships, swoon-worthy, slow burn romance, all things that I'm super excited to be brought to screen by the Jim Henson Company. The story follows Sophia, a truth witch, so a person who can instinctively know when somebody is telling the truth or lying, and her best friend Isolde, a thread witch, so a person who can tell the emotions that people are feeling and the interrelationships they have with others by seeing threads of different colors connecting people, as they try to spirit Sophia away from having to enter into an arranged marriage. But because of her witchery, Sophia is a potentially valuable pawn in this nation on a brink of war. And so the pair find themselves chased across the country by a blood witch mercenary, and their only hope for getting Sophia to a place where she could be potentially safe is by going to sea and escaping with the help of a second-born prince who sees the war coming and knows that it spells destruction and absolute annihilation for his small island nation. This is such a beautiful story, and what I have said doesn't even scratch the surface of how enormous the world spans and how interrelated all these various people and their factions are, and how emotionally fraught the series is. I think about this adaptation truly every single day, and I am at the edge of my seat every time that there is a new update about production. I cannot wait for this. I hope you can't wait for this. And I'm truly just so excited for the show to come out so I can share the love of this series with a much broader audience, because it truly deserves it. Prompt number 6 is what book and screen adaptation thereof do you appreciate as 2 entirely separate entities? And I can't say that I fully understand this question, because I feel this way about every adaptation. There are certain liberties that you can take with certain forms of media that you can't with others. There are drawbacks and affordances to both written media and screen adaptations, where in books you have to explain visuals in relative detail if you want to get your point across. In a movie or a TV show, you get that point across instantly just because it's on the screen. You're immediately put into a scene and all you really have to worry about is the people interacting within it. However, for the most part on screen, you don't get the internality of characters nearly as much. Even the best actor with the most expressive face in the world can't tell you the exact word-for-word intricacies of what a character is thinking. And that's only one example, and there are hundreds and thousands more. So I found it best for my enjoyments, particularly as a relatively persnickety reader, to divorce the idea of an adaptation from the original source content. An excellent example of this for me is, for example, Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I love both this book by Diana Wynne Jones and the Miyazaki adaptation thereof tremendously. They have both, I think I've said this phrase before, but I stand by it, they've both truly imprinted themselves onto my psyche as like formative media for the way that I love and want to tell my own stories. But they're pretty vastly different, down to the eponymous Howl having a pretty drastically different personality from book to film. And if I was looking for a perfect adaptation where everything that happens in the book exactly happens in the film and all of the characters behave in 100% the same way, I would have been really disappointed by the Miyazaki film, but I wasn't. I kept an open mind and I enjoyed both, and they are completely different entities in my head despite sharing a name. And that's the way I like it. Prompt number 7 is what hyped page-to-screen adaptation did you just not vibe with? And controversial answer, the Hunger Games trilogy. Now don't get me wrong, I think Catching Fire especially was beautifully done in an aesthetic sense. However, conceptually, the whole thing felt very ridiculously tone deaf. I don't think that there is a good way to make The Hunger Games like a franchise thematically. I think aging up the characters was a poor choice. Let's not even get into whitewashing Katniss. And overall, I think the hyper focus on like the love triangle between Gale, Katniss, and Peeta, taking away from the rest of the story, which was about the military-industrial complex and wartime and capitalistic subjugation of the poor. It was a bad take. And some might say that this was a directorial choice to demonstrate how we as the viewing audience are most akin to the people of the Capitol. And it was meant to be a way to encourage the audience to self-reflect on their own position in this capitalist society that we live in. You could say that if you didn't look at any of the marketing material or any of the audience reaction to the films as they came out. If that was the intention, the messaging was lost almost instantly. Prompt number 8 is what is the best page-to-screen adaptation you've ever seen? And I have to say Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy. If I have to choose just one, I'm gonna say The Two Towers, but honestly, the three of them are so enmeshed as one big story in my head, and that's the way J.R.R. Tolkien intended for The Lord of the Rings to be viewed anyway, so I don't feel bad about that. And in case it's not clear, I mean specifically the like extended editions. The others are fine. The extended editions are the only ones worth watching though. And again, this goes back to viewing the book and the adaptation as two entirely separate entities. Obviously, because of how massive The Lord of the Rings is in scope and in scale, you could not, even if you had like 5 hours per movie, put every plot point from the books directly into the films. But I think that Peter Jackson succeeded in bringing the right ones over, because I think that it carried the right tone and the right heart of the story over exceedingly well. Not to mention the aesthetics, which are the most immersive and beautiful aesthetics for a adaptation that I have ever seen, and I think that I ever will see. They hold up even by today's standards, and I think that's because there wasn't an over-reliance on CGI. Had CGI been used rather than the prosthetics, etc., that WetaWorks did an amazing job on, I think that the advancements of technology that we have made within the graphics sphere specifically would have outdated those movies just about instantly. But I think because we painstakingly handmade, and I say we because I feel a part of it even though I had nothing to do with it, and that should tell you how intensely important they are to me. Digression. I think the choice to do it by hand made it more immersive, and I will love it forever for being one of the most transportive adaptations that I have ever seen. I very rarely with film adaptations get the same transportive feeling as I do when I read books. Part of the reason I love to read books is because they take me to a new world, basically, every time I enter them. And the ones that I love best are the ones that transport me the farthest and make me forget almost that I'm existing as a person on a flesh substrate in this reality. Very rarely do I get that same immersive feeling in movies, but I do with Lord of the Rings, no matter how many times I watch it, and for that reason, it has to be my favorite. Prompt number 9 is what page-to-screen adaptation was better on the screen? And for this, I have to say 2 animated films, some of my favorites of all time. These would be How to Train Your Dragon and Shrek. In case you didn't know, Shrek was a book first, a picture book, I believe. I am indifferent about the picture book, but Shrek the movie, the first and the second, who again, I enmesh entirely as one great story in my mind, may be my favorite movie of all time. And it may be because those two are relatively short books, so rather than there being an overabundance of information that needs to be translated from page to screen, there was actually an underabundance, and the designers and the animators and the script writers got to sort of inject a lot of what they wanted into the story. I think when you have a little bit more freedom to inject yourself into a story, it becomes more honest, and I think that that's what I at least respond to best in my media. Prompt number 10 is what story did you like on screen that you would like to see on page? I mostly watch adaptations. I don't watch as many things as I read, but as far as some movies that I've seen relatively recently that aren't adaptations that I think would make pretty solid books, Knives Out and Parasite come to mind as the primary ones where I think they would be really interesting on page. With Parasite specifically, I think the tonal change from the first half to the second half of the story would be very, very interestingly done. And with Knives Out, I feel like you get a very Agatha Christie-esque vibe to it. And so the stories already have hallmarks of things that I've liked in books that I've read previously, so those are ones that I think would translate well and that I personally would enjoy getting book adaptations of. Prompt number 11 is what page-to-screen adaptation have you neither read nor watched because you can't decide which form to tackle first? And for this, I have to say the Expanse series, sort of. I think I've seen part of the first series, and then I found out it was a book series, And then I found out that each book was like 800 pages long and that there was like 12 of them. And I got series paralysis and stopped right away. Prompt number 11 is, what page-to-screen adaptation can you happily live without? The Hobbit by Peter Jackson. Everything that went right with The Lord of the Rings, I think went wrong with The Hobbit, and that's all I want to say about that, because I'm still salty and I will forever be salty, and I don't want to rant and be angry today. Actually, fuck that. I'm going to do my mini rant, my mini version of this rant. I'm going to give myself like 2 minutes maximum. The beauty of The Hobbit as a book is that it is serialized. Tolkien wrote it basically so each night he was telling his kids one chapter of the story, meaning each chapter is more or less its own individual story with a beginning, middle, and end. But my point is, if you want to make a film or a screen adaptation of The Hobbit, just serialize it. Make it a mini series that follows chapter by chapter what is happening. You don't need to include the stuff from the appendices. It's called The Hobbit for a reason, not Bilbo's here, but most of this is about like dwarves that we've made hot inexplicably, and also Gandalf is doing some magic fuck off angel shit. It's not necessary. The story centers Bilbo. The point of the story is that it centers Bilbo, who's an unlikely hero. It's meant to be about the triumph of the small man in a big expansive world. Is it an absolute sausage fest? Absolutely it is. Is it told in a relatively simplistic way so that children can enjoy it as well as the adults who already love the Lord of the Rings, etc.? Yes, it absolutely is. That's part of the draw of it. You do not need to shove it into the confines of a movie trilogy just because that seems to be the thing to do. The story does not support that formatting. I mean, I'm cutting off myself now. I don't need to talk about this further. I will just get angry and I don't want to ruin my day. But we close off the tag with a happy prompt. So question number 12. What is a book that you have recently read that you would like to see adapted to screen? So I have several answers. My first would be just about anything Maggie Stiefvater has ever written. I think the atmosphere that she puts in her writing automatically makes it so that what she has written would translate relatively easily to screen. The only issue with Stiefvater is that the plots kind of get away from you, and movies sort of rely, at least in my experience, on a more rigid X happens, which leads to Y happens, which leads to Z plot structure. And the stuff she writes is less about that and more like, what if the vibes carried the story? But I think that with the right script writer, you could wrangle the stories into something a little bit more rigid and structured, and it would translate beautifully to screen. I feel like The Raven Cycle, for example, would have a very Dead Poet Society vibe to it, and I think that would be chef's kiss stunning. On a different note, I think that the Inheritance Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin would make a wonderful miniseries. Well, I say miniseries, it would be a full series. Look, there's a lot of material to work with. The trilogy follows 3 interconnected but not directly sequential storylines, which I think would be very, very interesting to explore. In particular, I'd be interested to see the differences between the gods and the people who have basically enslaved them. And the political intrigue in the first book would be absolutely delicious to watch unfold on screen. I think, oh God, the character work that could be done. This would be a masterpiece, I think, in TV show format. Not movie. There's too much of it to be a movie. I think a TV show is the way to go for this one. But a book in a series that I think would make a beautiful movie or series of movies is The Winter's Curse by Marie Rudkowski. This is like right on the cusp of high and low fantasy. It's high in that it's secondary world, but it's low as in there's not a crazy amount of magic, which I think would make it a little bit easier to adapt. The plot is relatively X to Y to Z, so I think that it would be very, very simple to adapt. At the heart of it, there is a wonderful and deeply romantic and deeply heart-wrenching romance that I think would draw many of you in. But I think what sets The Winter's Curse apart from other stories in this vein is that it's told from Kestrel's point of view, and Kestrel is part of the privileged and truly villainous class. Her people, the Valorians, have colonized and enslaved the Hurani people. And while she didn't have a direct hand in, being in the military and going in, she does live with the privileges of being of a higher echelon of people in the society. So when she falls in love with a Hurani man, that complicates things tremendously, and she has to not only figure out what's going on in her relationship and figure out how to deal with the revolution that obviously is going to happen, because that's the only way that a relationship between somebody like her and somebody like Aaron could ever be healthy, is if he, stopped being a literal slave. But she has to do a lot of individual and personal growth and soul searching to engage with the way that she was complicit in this system, whether or not she personally agreed with it. The second book, Winter's Crime, in particular, is absolutely chock full of political intrigue a la Reign, but I think all 3 would be beautifully mapped to screen, and I would love to see it. And there you have it. That is my page to screen book tag. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like me, maybe consider subscribing to my channel. I actually am back and will be posting every weekend, more or less, and I would love to have you join my little booktube family. If a week is too long to wait for more bookish content from me, I have all of my bookish socials linked in the description box below. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. But for now, I think I'm done with procrastinating. I have one final paper left to write, and then I'll be done with my master's for the semester. So I'm gonna go and take care of that. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you with another video very, very soon. Goodbye.